Othercide is a game where the manifestation of suffering breaks through the veil that separates reality from the unreality. It comes for the world and tears the fabric of the world apart. The world's last hope, an immortal spirit mommy named Mother, is slain, but her spirit resurrects as naked red spirit mommy, and it's your job to help her and her daughters fight the evil that comes for the world, both the fanatical plague doctor cult that signed on to the chaos, and the evil spirits of the damned, the others. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the story. It's truthfully not that interesting to me. Sorry. I'll cover the basics you need to know, though. So, suffering, the manifestation of it, has taken possession of a child known as the Child. It's about as intuitive of a name as Mother is. Suffering has 4 generals, and it's up to the daughters to slay them and eventually Suffering. Mother has taken the last for energy to create a snapshot in time right before the end of the world, and it's within this snapshot of time you can enter the synapses of the weird creature flesh egg Suffering has created and fight cultists and nightmares alike to empower your daughters to become strong enough to fight Suffering. Othercide has this aesthetic of a dark gothic horror story mixed in with pseudo-religious terminology and fluffy idolization of abstract concepts that make Kingdom Hearts look tame by comparison. The game talks about memories and suffering in a sort of way that seems like they're being used as an aesthetic rather than part of the story. It never dives into what they actually mean. Memories and remembrance specifically are used as skill upgrades, but the story doesn't mention how anyone is losing their memories. One of the types of missions is called a penance, but all it really is just another type of kill the monster mission, and it doesn't actually talk on what penance means or the definition of penance. Jello Apocalypse is a YouTuber who makes videos satirizing popular intellectual properties. In his Kingdom Hearts video, there was a line about how you can write Kingdom Hearts dialogue by putting words like darkness, heart, keyblade, light, and heartless in random order. And honestly, you could kind of do the same thing for Othercide, except swapping out those words for words like memory, reality, suffering, pain. So, I'm all done talking about the story. It's really not that great. The gameplay is the most important part of Othercide to me. Othercide is a tactical turn-based strategy game with roguelike elements that plays similarly to XCOM, at least at first glance. It adds a lot to the formula than other strategy games I've played, though. In most games like this I've played, the combat order generally goes all of the player's character's moves and then all of the enemy's character's moves. But in Othercide, it's a little different. Turn order is instead based off of initiative tracker at the bottom of the screen, and countering enemies and dominating the initiative order is your key to success. You can see when each character is going to attack in the queue, and you can use that to your advantage, focusing on the enemy who's about to act next turn so you can save yourself some trouble and deal some damage and give you more breathing room on the initiative tracker. That's the kind of thing you need to look out for. The part about Othercide I find interesting is that it presents as a tactics game like XCOM, but the grid combat isn't even the most intriguing part. This initiative thing is the most important part. Managing your initiative is key, and most of your abilities take that into consideration. Many abilities can change the initiative of other characters. Other abilities are slow charge of attacks that have their own initiative, and that gives you or the enemy time to move out of the way. The Shield Bearer class has an attack called Slam, which pushes enemies' initiative back every time you use it, and it's incredibly useful either for stun locking a single enemy indefinitely, or scraping out enough time for your other daughters to react and kill enemies. Your daughters... Okay, this is weird. I'm gonna try and just call them characters. Thematically, daughter makes sense because they're the daughters of Mother, which I really hate when games do this. As a quick aside, just give characters names. Just give them names. Anyway, your characters don't heal between missions like in other games. In fact, the only way to heal them is actually to sacrifice other characters of equal or greater level. To me, this is unique, but I don't believe that unique always means good. A lot of time when I see unique mechanics that make games more difficult, usually that's because there's some other benefit to it, where if you master this mechanic, it's actually rewarding or works in your favor, or there's some other benefit. But to me, this really only feels like another way to punish the player or pad out the game. As a roguelike game, I get the idea that you're not going to keep them because nobody ever beats a roguelike on the first run without any upgrades or bonuses, but still, I really liked a lot of the characters I had and I lost, and it really sucked to lose them. The health situation is made even worse because many of the character abilities can only be activated in the first place by sacrificing a percentage of their max HP, which again can't be recovered without sacrificing another character. Another gripe I have with this game is the class system, and specifically, there's only 3 classes, and each of these classes only have a limited amount of skills they can take, meaning there's very little customization that you can have for your characters. And to be honest, after a while, all of the characters, they start to look same to me. Even auto-generated names for them become indistinct and uninspired. At first, it looks like there's a lot of different names, and there are a lot of different names, but they're so unique that you're going to notice if 2 of your characters are named the same thing. After a few hours of play, I stopped identifying my characters by name or appearance, and I just began to look at their class and their level. They feel more like chess pieces than characters that I actually work to craft and design, compared to other games like XCOM where you can choose what they look like, you can choose how to build them and choose their equipment, or Final Fantasy Tactics where you can design, you can build their class and give them skills from multiple classes to truly customize them. There's none of that in Othercide. As I mentioned earlier, this game has roguelike elements to it. Completing missions, or synapses, as they're called in Othercide, they grant you shards that you need to activate remembrances, which are bonus effects that raise stats, they allow resurrections, they give special bonuses on your next run. I can see how over generations you unlock more of these remembrances and resurrect your favorite daughters, and you can slowly build up an army, but as I mentioned before, the lack of variety in these characters makes it hard to get attached, so I find myself just resurrecting my highest level gunslinger each run, and that's not really fun. It's just saving me work. I don't actually care about this character. So here's the gameplay loop. You've got a group of daughters and earn blood and shards for each completed mission. There are often multiple missions each day, but you don't have to do all of them. You only have to do one before you can just rest and reset for the day. Each of the characters can only do 1 synapse per day, which means that you're going to end up needing an entire team to complete multiple missions. There are 7 days each week, and at the end of the week, you fight the boss. There are 4 bosses in total. They've each got their own mechanics, but on my first run, I didn't have strong enough units to get the first boss down past 50% of his max HP, but I had better luck the second time thanks to remembrances, and it was pretty clutch, so it still felt good to see the boss go down. Now, I'm going to stop complaining here, and I want to go back to one thing I do like, actually. The codex, or codices, whatever they are. Normally codexes, I don't know if that's the right term, but I'm just going to say it anyway, they're usually there in video games as like an encyclopedia for lore and expeditions dumps about world building. They do that in Othercide, however, it's better than any other codex I've seen in a video game, because in addition to having lore, it actually gives you gameplay hints and tells you about the mechanics of the enemies that you're reading the entry pages of. It tells you important things like their mechanics and how they target and who the enemy will target first and their attack patterns. And whenever you beat a new boss, there's a considerable difficulty spike and a new wave of enemies to learn to keep you on your toes. Now, before I get to my biggest gripe about the game, I do want to touch on the aesthetics. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. The beautiful gothic setting, the character models for the daughters, they're all actually beautiful without looking fan servicey. And the monsters are actually pretty grotesque and kind of terrifying. Having the entire game set in monochrome, plus red, I think that counts as part of monochrome, does wonders to help immerse you in the grim darkness of the setting. And normally I hate this sort of setting, specifically 1900s gothic horror, plague doctor, spoopy, Cthulhu, that kind of stuff. I normally hate that kind of stuff, but I was actually really getting into the setting. Now, to get into my biggest gripe with the game. The grind is real. I cannot overstate how real this grind is. The game is really grindy because after the first reset, you learn just about all of the mechanics of the game. There's nothing player side left to discover as far as mechanics that you can control. There's only 3 classes to play, and they're all available from the start. Hell, the first characters you're given in any run are one of each, and in my opinion, that's already the strongest combination of classes. Okay, so in full honesty, there actually is a 4th class, but you don't even get that one until later on in the game. So up until you get to that point, however, there's nothing new for you to learn except new monster attack strategies. Getting stronger daughters is done by having them fighting in missions, but if they get injured, remember, they can only be healed by sacrificing another daughter, but they have to be the same level or greater, so your best characters are constantly being injured, but they have to remain unhealed unless you give up another one of your best fighters, or alternatively, you can just grind lower level characters to higher level just for the sake of healing them. You can resurrect characters who have died or been sacrificed, but you only get a few resurrections per run, so trying to get a stable group together is hard. When you get your characters to higher levels, trying to heal them becomes an ordeal. You're just training characters just to heal, to train more characters to heal. The grind is not an enjoyable one, because normally in a video game, when you grind, you can see your progress, and it's permanent, it's there, it shows. But in Othercide, you're grinding only to see your progress disappear in massive chunks whenever you get a game over, or the 3 characters you're going all in on, they get wiped in a mission and you have to struggle to get your backup characters through the next fight without the heavy hitters. Or, as with the last run I did, my main 3 fighters got down to 10% of their HP, so they were forced to sit on the back line because they were 3 levels higher than the rest of my team. I couldn't heal any of them without sacrificing one of them. So, the characters I'm trying to go all in on, they're unusable for the rest of the run because I don't have high enough level characters to heal them by the time I get to the boss. So, they just sit there being useless. Every time you complete a run, all the shards you've collected are totaled up, and you can use them to give passive bonuses to your next run, but it doesn't feel like it's making it easier for me. At this point, I feel like I understand the mechanics well enough, I can play just fine on my own, but without these runs, the bonuses, I simply don't have enough stats to win. I feel as though I lost not because of my own failings or because I made a bad strategic choice, but because the numbers weren't high enough. That's not a good feeling to have. Video games feel good when they feel fair, and losing because I didn't replay the early levels enough doesn't feel fair. I don't think I hate grinding on its own as long as the actual gameplay is fun or there's a challenge to it. Like, I play Final Fantasy XIV off and on, and I actually enjoy grinding in Final Fantasy XIV. There's a lot of different classes to play, so whenever I get bored of one class, I can just try out another. Grinding wealth is actually pretty zen too. I'll turn on a podcast, I'll spend hours running around in a giant circle in Gridania collecting crafting materials, because when I put those things in the marketplace, I see them fat stacks coming in, and it all feels like it was worth it. I had a good time doing it, I enjoyed it. It was an easy, repetitive task that required little brain power, and I got a reward for it. I can't say the same for Othercide, where you have to grind only to have your progress lost after each run. I don't think grinding belongs in a roguelike at all. Unlockables should be the main form of progression in a roguelike, but there are no unlockables except for that one class I mentioned. That's more than halfway through the game. Even if I were looking at this as a turn-based strategy game instead of a roguelike, like XCOM for example. XCOM has a limited number of classes, but the amount of research and development you can do to improve your base and your equipment and your soldiers keeps the game fresh with new mechanics, new equipment, and new technology. Othercide doesn't have that. Othercide gives you everything up front. I don't recommend Othercide.